Hey everyone, this is Sandeep back with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to continue our Spring course series. So in this series, I'm creating multiple videos. So I think I did couple of videos. The first video where I talked about the IOC and dependency injection in the version of control and dependency injection. I have also talked about how to create the Maven project. And I touched upon a little bit, about how to use Maven for building our Spring projects or a Java project. In this video, I'm going to continue and we're going to talk about how we can use Spring to manage our dependencies. So instead of creating your own object by yourself, or instead of creating the factory which will manage the objects, Java objects for you, we are going to use or we're going to leverage Spring features to manage our dependencies. So let's jump into the video. So this is the idea basically which I wanted to show you. So today we're going to jump into the annotations, some of the Spring annotations which we're going to use a lot in future. So today we are going to talk about the bean annotation. So at bean, if you see here at bean annotation, right? So I'll give you the example. Say suppose you have a car class, right? You have created a car class in your project. Now, if you create a car using this syntax, car is equals to new car. In that case, there's something called Spring context. Okay, and think like Spring context is nothing but a library or maybe a module, or think like this is a manager who manages this Spring object. Okay, I mean Spring beans. So you don't need to create those objects by yourself. Spring is going to create and manage those objects for you, right? We talked about that factory, right? So maybe you can compare and contrast with that. So that car will be not known to the Spring context, because Spring context is where, all of the Spring dependencies or Java dependencies we are going to create reside. So instead of that, I can write a function. So I can create a configuration file. We will see practically how to do that. And I can write a function inside that. Again, I'm using the new syntax, and later on we will see how we can get rid of new syntax also. This new keyword we are not going to use. But if you put a bean annotation, so the Spring will know, okay, this object I need to manage. I need to create and manage this car object, whichever is getting created here. So that will belong to Spring context. So whenever I want to have this object, this car object, Spring, I can ask Spring and Spring is going to provide me that object. So I think practically it will be more easy to understand. So we're going to do follow some step-by-step process to understand this. So we are going to create multiple Java Pojo classes. That will be the step one. Step two, we're going to tell Spring about these classes by creating a config file. So there are two different things we are going to do here. We will create multiple objects. Okay. Then we will create a configuration file where we will tell Spring, okay, these are the objects which you need to manage. I'm not going to create it. You create it and give it to me. Okay. And the steps 3, we are going to use all those Pojo classes in our main application. Obviously, we have created the config file. We have created the Pojos, right? Now we need all those objects so that I can use it. So this is the idea. So we are going to create a new project, First, I'll come back to this slide. So let's create a new Maven project. So I am going to switch to my IntelliJ window. And if you see this Spring course, this is a folder, or this is the empty project I have created. I'm going to share the link on the GitHub so that, you can follow along. So I have already created a Maven dev folder here where we have last time, created the Maven project. Now in this video, let's continue, and I'm going to add a new module. So let's go to project structure. You can click on modules, right? And let's add a new module. So this new module, maybe I can call this module as a bean annotation. Let's name it bean annotation. This will be a Java project, IntelliJ 17 version of Java. Advanced setting, we can go and we can give the name to the module, right? Content root, bean annotation inside Spring course. Everything looks good. And I can just click on create. So I don't want to add it actually. So let's cancel this and let's create the project. So if you see here, right, I got the bean annotation project created, and I have my main class also created here, which is printing maybe the hello world. Let's keep it like that. Now here I need to add the pom.xml file, right? Because I need to add the dependency. So just to save time, I'm going to grab the pom.xml from here, and I'm going to paste it here. Okay, from the last project. Okay, so this dependency I'm going to remove. And so obviously now we need to give the responsibility of managing our Java objects to Spring, right? So Spring is a library and Spring has different jars. So those jars, they contain that particular responsibility. So I'm going to include that jar here. So the jar which we are going to include here is called the Spring context jar. So I'll go to my browser basically, and let me search for Spring context. Sorry, context Maven dependency. And it will obviously show you the Maven repository only. So we want to have a Spring context jar. So let's go with the latest version. You can also do that. Use the latest version. I'm going to copy this. I'll go back to my IntelliJ and I'm going to paste it. Okay, so I have the dependency here. This one, Spring context, and let's see what dependencies we have here. We have 17, then we have core and JCL something. I'm going to save it, and probably it should load. If it doesn't, load the dependencies, we can just click on this refresh button on the right hand side. It's going to grab that XML, read from that pom.xml, and it should add those. Okay, so we are refreshing the Maven demo, but I need to add my bean annotation, So this pom, let's add this pom first, add as a Maven project. So if you have an IntelliJ, it will be easy to follow. And you see that all of those jars are coming, right? So it has read this pom.xml file. It has seen there are some new dependencies we need to download. So it went ahead and it has downloaded all those dependencies for us. So now we got Maven demo and we got another Maven demo. I don't know why we are getting two Maven demo. It should be bean annotation. The reason is because I think in my POM, I have the name as Maven demo. So let me change this to bean. So this is copy paste error. So bean annotation. And now if I refresh, see that we got bean annotation here, and we got the another project, which is Maven demo. Okay, cool. So I think we are ready from the project perspective. So let's jump into the step one, where we are going to create multiple Pojo object, right? So the first object, so these are different beans I want to create. So let's start by creating the packages first. So I'm going to create a new package called com.cws for code with Sandeep. And I'm going to put all my beans inside the beans package. So let's create some beans. So we'll start with the idea which I have implemented in my first project, right? Or the first video where, we have created the mobile, and mobile is going to have the SIM, right? And we have created the SIM factory class, which was managing the Vodafone and Geo SIM. So I'm going to implement the same idea here. So I'm going to create two different beans here. First one will be the Vodafone. So my Vodafone SIM, right? And maybe we can have one property here, say private IMEI number. Okay, so this will be string. So we are going to keep IMEI number, and this you can set, from outside, or maybe while creating the. So let me put the constructor also. So let's put constructor Vodafone, and here probably you can pass that IMEI number, and that will be a string. Okay, and we can set this dot IMEI number as opposed to IMEI. So whenever you're going to create, SIM, you can set the IMEI number. And I'm going to have two different methods here. First one will be public void say calling, and inside that, I'm just going to put the s out, system.out.println. Actually, I need s out, and I'll say calling using Vodafone. Okay, next I'm going to put another function which will be data, and I'm just going to grab this system out.println, and we can say surfing using Vodafone. Okay, so this class is created by myself, and if I want, I can create the objects of this class by myself. So first of all, we'll see how we can create object by myself, but I'm going to create another bean. Let's create geo also, right? I'm going to grab all of these things from here. Let's grab it and paste it here. So this is also going to have the IMEI number, calling. So calling using geo, and this one will be calling surfing using geo. Okay, so I have two different beans. Now I'll go back to my main.java file and say, suppose I want to, so the way, we create our Java objects by ourselves, that's the traditional way, right? But Spring has something different where, Spring manages or creates and manages the object for you. So you don't need to create. That's a really good idea, and you'll feel happy about it, when we will move forward and when we will create all those projects using Spring. So here I'm just going to create my Vodafone object first. So let's say sim1, I'm going to call it sim1, new Vodafone, and probably we can pass some IMEI number. Maybe I'll put some number here, something like this. Okay, and now I can just say console.log, sorry, not console.log, I'm mixing JavaScript. System.out.println sim1 dot calling, right? Or maybe I don't need to, that method itself has this s out, right? So I'll say sim1 dot calling and sim1 dot data. So this is one way, the traditional way how we create our own Java objects. And if I want to run this application now, probably I need to build it first. And to build your application, you just need to go here, just first click on clean. And if everything goes well, it should clean, and then you need to click. That's why, I'm using IntelliJ, because it's going to make your life really, really easy. And if you see that, right, that target folder has been created here. So Maven has compiled and created all those classes for you. Now, if I want to run, probably I can run this main class now. And okay, so we are seeing release version 5, Annotation SDK 17 does not support source version 1.5. Okay, so there is an issue with my Java version, Java SDK version. Downgrade project SDK in setting to 1.5 or compatible. Maven build file 17. So probably I'll change my Java version and then it should work fine. Okay, so I did some changes, in my pom.xml file. So I have added this properties, where, I've changed the compiler setting to 11, downgraded the version to Java 11. And somehow I just did, clean, and I did the install again. And then I ran the project from here and it started working fine. So I'm running it again for you. And if you see here, right, calling using Vodafone, surfing using Vodafone. So far, so good. So it's working fine. So probably you can do the same thing, add, copy and paste this part from the source code I have provided on the GitHub, and it should work fine for you also. But if you face any challenges, Google it and you should be able to solve it. Okay, so now if I come back to my main.java file, right, I have created my own Pojo classes and I'm creating them by myself. Now, I want Spring to do that for me. Obviously, we're going to use the new syntax to create the objects now, but later on, we're going to avoid that too. But now, we'll move on to the second step where we're going to tell Spring about these classes by creating something called config file. So let's come back to my tablet. So this is the idea, right? So we have the Vodafone and the Geo class, right? I have my Vodafone and Geo class. Now I want Spring to manage those objects, create and manage those objects for me, right? So I'm going to create a configuration file. We need to create some kind of configuration to tell Spring, okay, you manage all of these classes for me, object and basically object. So we're going to use annotation config application context. This is the name of the class, really wrong name. And we're going to use this config file inside our main, and we'll, instead of creating our object by ourselves, we're going to ask Spring to give me those objects. And I'll show you the example of string and integer beans also. So basically, I'm going to convert these normal classes, this Vodafone and Geo classes, into something called a bean in Spring. So they call the objects which they manage, the Spring manages, right? They call them as a bean. So I'm going to convert a normal Java class to a bean, or a Java object to a bean. Okay, so this is the idea. So let's create the configuration file. For that, maybe like I'm going to create a separate folder or package. Let's do that. So probably I'll go ahead and create a new package. com.cws. This is config, right? So I'm going to create a config package. Inside that, I'm going to create a new Java class. This is again will be a Java class, and I'm going to call it app config. Okay. And first of all, you just need to put this annotation so that Spring will understand, okay, this is where I need to find the configuration. So when we're going to run this project, Spring will know, okay, all of the Java objects which I need to create and manage are configured inside this config file, and we are going to provide this config file to the Spring. So let's create our first bean. So I'm going to create first I'll create a Vodafone bean. So I'm going to write a function called Vodafone, which is going to return me a Vodafone object. But so let's first create the object here. So I'm going to say Vodafone is equals to new. And let's provide some kind of IMI number. And now I'm going to return it. Now I'm going to tell Spring, you manage this Vodafone object. You create and manage this Vodafone object by just putting the annotation called bean. So now this Vodafone object is created and managed by Spring. Okay, so now let's see how we can use Spring to create and manage our dependencies. So I'll go back to my main file, and as I said, we are going to use something called annotation. It's a really big name, that's why I've written it down. Annotation config application context. So this is our context I'm going to create. Let's put it down, new annotation config application context. And we need to provide that file, that config file. So I'm going to say app config.class. So now the Spring will know, okay, this is the configuration file. So basically, all of your project Java objects, you're going to put inside this app config. And I know this is a tedious job, but we are going to see the easiest way. Okay. So all of my application Java objects will be configured inside this app config, and Spring is going to manage that. So Spring is going to read this file, and okay, it's going to say, okay, I need to create the object of Vodafone. So it's going to create the object of Vodafone with this IMEI number. Maybe I have something else, right? And we'll create that. So all of those things are now managed by Spring. I'm not going to use any new syntax. The Spring is going to create the objects for me. So now let's use this context, and ask this context, give me my Vodafone object. Okay, so let's create another sim. Let's call it sim2. And instead of creating object by yourself, I'm going to say context dot get bean, and I'm asking for the Vodafone bin, right? So I'm asking for the Vodafone dot class bin. So Spring will go and Spring is going to check in the config file. Do I have a bean with the name of Vodafone class? And it's going to return it back to me. So now I can use sim2 for calling. I can use sim2 for data. And let's put some kind of system.log here, calling using Vodafone, and maybe I'll just do the string concatenation, and I'll put the IMEI number also, so that we'll have the idea like which IMEI number it's using. So let's put the IMEI number here, and let's put the IMEI number here. So we will know the differences, right, between two different Java objects. So this is with this IMEI number, and the first one I've created with different IMEI number. So let's build. So I'm going to click on clean. And if everything goes well, we're going to say install. Should build the project. I'm going to run it. And hopefully we'll see the output. Calling using Vodafone, see that? This is the object which I have created with IMEI number. Surfing using Vodafone, and this is calling using Vodafone, and this is created by Spring, right? If you see here, right, this is inside this app config. So now Spring is managing the objects for me, and I am able to use those objects. I'm able to uh, do whatever I want to do with those objects, right? Okay, so now let's move on and let's talk about the our next topic, right? And that is okay. So I need to, before moving on to that topic, I'll show you the example of string and integer beans also. So let's create the string and integer type beans also. So I'm going to create another bean here. That will be a string bean, and let's call it name, where I'm going to return my name. So you can create the bean with our normal Java types also. Like I'll create another bean which is an integer bean. I'll call it age. Obviously, in big projects, I don't think so you're going to use this. So let's copy and paste age here. Maybe I'll put some age here like 35. Let's save it. And now I'm going to call this. I'm going to use those beans also here. Beans actually. So I'm going to use my context, and I'm going to ask for the string bean, and this will be string name, and the next one I'm just going to copy and paste. This will be integer, and let's call it age. This will be integer dot class. So it's going to see, okay, do I have a string bean here? So it's going to grab this one, okay, of the string type. Do I have an integer? Okay, I have the integer one, so it's going to grab the age one. Now again, we need to do the clean install. This we are going to avoid in the future videos, but for now, I just wanted to start from scratch. This is not the way you're going to create your beans or Java object, but you have to understand all these concepts also. So install, and finally I'm going to run. Let's run it. Okay, it's taking some time. Okay, so I don't see that output because I think console.log, I mean the system.out.println. Sorry about that. So I'm going to say name, and there will be another sysout which I need to put. That will be age. So I'm going to save again. We need to do the clean and install. Okay, so the target folder has been created. Let me run it. It got a bit slow. Okay, so we see that, right? You see that we are getting Sandeep and 35. Let's move on to the next topic. I really want to talk about it, right? You must be thinking, or this question might have came into your mind. If I have another string bean, right? If I have another string bean, how it's going to work, right? Don't you think there will be conflict? Maybe name, here I have last name, something like that. Don't you think there will be conflict because it's looking at the type, the class type of that particular bean? And and obviously there is a conflict. So I'm going to show you with an example, so say suppose, I'm going to create another bean. So I'm just going to copy and paste here. So I'll create another bean with the name of Vodafone, but I'm going to give it the name of Vodafone 1. And let's change the IMI number to something else now. And let's return this new bean from here. And now I'll go back to my app, and we are creating another Vodafone bean. So we have two Vodafone bean here. So Vodafone, right? So what's going to happen? So let's clean and install again. And we have created the Vodafone bean, right? Using Vodafone.class. And it should conflict now because we have two different Vodafone beans, right? So let's run and let's see what happens. Okay, you see that, right? Something in red. We got an exception in thread main where it's saying no unique bean definition exception. As I said, right? What if we have two different beans with the same class type? It's going to throw. So Spring is helping you, it's stopping your program, it's running, but it's stopping it, it's telling you there is no unique bean definition exceptions. I'll switch to my tab. So this is what we are getting, no unique bean definition exception. So if you have multiple objects of same types, Spring doesn't understand which bean to return. Hence, it throws a no unique bean definition exception. So we can handle this by passing the bean name and bean class as an argument to get bean method. So there is a solution for it, right? So you can have, obviously you can have two different beans here, right? So I have this Vodafone, I have this Vodafone 1, right? So I can use those names here. So instead of calling something like this get bean, I'm going to say, hey, give me Vodafone bean. I'm not asking for Vodafone 1. I'm asking for Vodafone bean. So it's going to return me Vodafone bean, right? Or I can say Vodafone 1 and it's going to return me Vodafone 1. So let's go with the Vodafone 1. I'm going to again clean and install. And let's run. So you see that now we are calling using Vodafone 12344. So now it's grabbing this Vodafone 1 bean instead of Vodafone. So this is how you can differentiate, and you can get rid of that no unique bean definition exception. There's another way which I want to talk about. You can name your beans also. There is a possibility where you can give your beans a name. So I can just use something like this. This is a syntax where I can give any name to my bean. Like this is my V1 bean, okay, and then I'll just have another name here. So I'll just give this one as a V2. So you can name your bean something like this. And now maybe instead of grabbing I'm going to grab V1. Right? So I'm referring to the name. So let's clean and install. And run. This time I should see we are calling with the first bean, right? So 2820, right? And we are getting other things also. So this is how I think. So this is what I wanted to cover in this part of the video. So quickly, I'm going to summarize. So instead of us managing the dependencies, instead of we are creating the object for our classes, we are giving that responsibility to Spring. How we can do that? So obviously we can create our beans. I have created all my beans, right? So if you see, I have created the Geo bin, I have created a Vodafone bin. I haven't used the Geo bin, but let it be. And then you need to create a configuration file and you need to tell Spring, okay, these are all my beans, and you go ahead and create them and you manage them. Whenever I'm going to, I want them, I'm just going to go into my main application. I'm going to create the application config, annotation config, application context class, object of that. I'm going to give you the configuration file, and I'm going to use your methods to grab the beans, right? Even you can create the beans for string and integers also, right? So all of these things, right? And then we have seen, like, if there are two beans with the same class type, we can use the name, bean name, or we can call our beans with the function name also, right? So there are multiple ways, and I know, I mean, you must be thinking there will be hundreds of hundreds of Java objects you're going to have, right? And are you going to write all of this code to so that Spring can manage all those 100 objects? And you don't need to do that. I just want to tell you the concept, where, from the beginning to the end. In the upcoming videos, there are ways, easiest way where we are going to leverage the Spring dependency management feature or IOC feature pretty well. So I hope you understood the concept of bean, because I wanted to talk about bean. Bean is nothing but a specialized name given by Spring to our Java objects, nothing else. So it's just like a normal Java object. So I'm going to conclude this video here. I'll come back with the next video in our Spring course series. Thanks for watching the video, and I'm going to see you in the next video. Until then, you take care and goodbye.